What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here, PackersNews.com, live on Facebook later in the afternoon on Monday. The Packers back on the practice field earlier today, getting some guys back from injury, namely Mike Daniels, Kevin King, and a few others. Still without a few other guys, notably running backs. Jamal Williams, Devontae Mays taking it easy today. However, Aaron Jones back in the fray, doing team stuff, first time since he went down with a hamstring injury 2 weeks ago. So camp rolls on, albeit at a limited pace at this point. Not as many public practices. The Packers did have a practice yesterday that was closed. They were back on Ray Nitschke Field this afternoon. Locker room is open this afternoon. Guys talking a little bit. But I thought I'd come on here and talk to you fine folks after a weekend and see what's on your mind when it comes to your Green Bay Packers. Sup? How you doing, Joe? Louisiana, what's up? What's going on, Jonathan? Thanks for checking in. Chris, what's up? Not a whole heck of a lot. The Packers, as I said, getting a little healthier, I would say. David Bakhtiari was out there today. In fact, the entire starting offensive line was there except for Justin McCray, who was dealing with a calf injury that he suffered against Pittsburgh. In his place was Byron Bell, who had been running at tackle and now is running at guard, which, if anybody follows me on Twitter, you'll know that I have been saying pretty much since they signed him that is his natural position. I think guard makes a lot of sense for him. McCarthy said this morning that McCray will most likely miss this entire week, which gives Bell a significant shot at showing what he can do at the guard position. And if he's going to make the team, I would think this is the stretch where he makes his case. That's not to discount what they've seen from guys like Pankey and Patrick, who have played pretty well so far through camp, but Bell obviously is a well-experienced, well-traveled veteran who could give them some quality snaps at guard. We'll see how he holds up this week and Friday night in Oakland. Hello to everybody checking in. Are Haha and Pipkins the answer at safety? Well, definitely not Pipkins, since I think you're thinking of maybe Bryce, but Pipkins is a corner. But Haha, he's the answer whether they like it or not. He's on his last year of his contract, and he's a former Pro Bowler, former first-round pick. He'll be given every opportunity throughout the season at that free safety spot. Now, opposite him, whether it's Bryce, Jones, what have you, we'll see what they do there. There are some free agent possibilities out on the street, though I would tend to think that Brian Gutekunst is going to shy away from those and probably stick with what he has on the roster. Maybe Marwin Evans starts getting a little bit more consideration. He's an athletic guy who's been, with the team now for a number of years, former undrafted guy that, has looked good in limited opportunities throughout both preseason and regular season action. But as far as if they're going to go out and sign anybody off the street, so to speak, I would be very surprised. Will the Packers pursue Khalil Mack? Always a question until it's not. I would be very surprised if they gave up anything for him. They would have to give up significant draft capital and or a player, plus sign him to a lucrative deal, all while trying to extend Aaron Rodgers and make him the highest paid player in the history of the game. I'd be absolutely shocked if that's the route Brian Gutekunst went. What do you think is up with Haha? Why the downward trend? Well, it's not exactly downward. I think he's probably playing up to where we saw him last year. He hasn't started to bounce back from that, if that's what you're kind of implying, which I would agree with that assessment. But as I've stated often, both during the season last year and during this stretch of the offseason leading up to camp, it's not that far away from where he was playing his Pro Bowl season. He had a few more turnovers. He was a little bit more solid when it came to tackling, but this brand of football you're seeing from HaHa Clinton-Dix is not that dissimilar to what we saw his Pro Bowl year, especially the later part of that season. Like I said, he missed fewer tackles and he created a few more turnovers. But as far as his overall game, it's not that different. And the thing is I think some of his kind of shortcomings or negatives kind of get blown up in this social media age. No doubt about that. And I'm probably guilty of that as well. I put up a clip just the other day of he and Kentrell Bryce missing tackles on that opening touchdown drive, or that second touchdown drive from the Steelers. Other than that play where he missed that tackle, he had a number of quality plays from scrimmage. Those don't get highlighted because they're not exactly highlight reel worthy, but the mistakes get magnified. So I'm not ready to sit here and say he's regressing, he's on a downward spiral, and he's become a terrible player, because I don't think that's the case. I don't think he's far off from being a quality starter and the kind of starter the Packers need on their defense, but I do think he is not on an upward trajectory from where we saw him last season. Will Gilbert be starting on defense? Jameson, I tend to doubt it. If all things being equal, and provided that obviously Nick Perry and Clay Matthews are healthy, who knows how often that will be, I think Gilbert will be your first guy off the bench. Now that said, there will be instances where Matthews undoubtedly will kick inside and give Gilbert some opportunities. They'll rotate those guys to try and keep them healthy, which will give Gilbert more opportunities. But I don't think he's ready to crack the starting lineup over those two just yet. Chances we sign Eric Reed, I would say not good. If you follow me on Twitter, you know I've advocated for it. I think it makes a world of sense. He's much better than anybody they have outside of HaHa Clinton-Dix, but there are no signs that Brian Gutekunst is going to go that route. What are the strengths and weaknesses of this defense? Good question. Well, right now, it's kind of funny, but I would say the cornerback position has suddenly looked a lot better with the influx of talent from the rookie class, namely Jair Alexander and Josh Jackson, along with the signing of Tramon Williams. The corner has suddenly become a bit of a strength. Now, I'm not ready to sit here and say they're the Legion of Boom reincarnated, but they certainly they're certainly much better than they were last year. Now, clearly there are still issues there. Devon House is not playing up to his capabilities, at least not on a consistent basis. You've seen guys like Dimitri Goodson get burned repeatedly. There are still problem areas, but for the most part, I think you throw those three in there. You've seen Rollins kind of play the dime back. You've seen Pipkins play dime and roll in there a little bit and play somewhat inconsistent, but I think there's been more good than bad. I think suddenly that has become a bit of a strength. Now, we have to see what happens when teams start game planning and, things matter starting week one, but when you look at where they are in the secondary compared to where they were last year, it is a noted improvement. Where's Beagle? He's been out there. He's been playing. He just hasn't lit it up. I think there may, have been some big expectations for Beagle, which probably aren't being met as far as the hopes outside the building for where Beagle might be at this point. But that said, you have to remember what he was expected to be coming in, at least most likely in the league. If you ask scouts and personnel people, a lot of people saw him as a special teams guy with a fringe possibility of being a contributor from scrimmage. That's pretty much where he's at right now. That doesn't mean he can't continue to improve. That doesn't mean that he won't be a factor down the road. But right now, coming admittedly after his first real offseason in the NFL, I think he's about what a lot of people in the league expected him to be. Again, that doesn't mean that he can't continue to improve and become something of a threat for them from scrimmage. But right now, I think he's still trying to learn how to play in the NFL. Is 76 hurt? He's been dealing with a quad injury, but he was out there today and playing and going full during team stuff. So that gives you an indication that he should be back. Beagle was a bust and we all knew it. Gary, he was hurt all last year. And then he was thrown in after not having literally any offseason. To call him a bust is pretty naive. Has Quinn Rollins been playing more slot corner or safety? Bit of both. He's been playing that dime role. He's been playing a hybrid linebacker spot. You saw him playing safety against the Steelers. But, I think you probably see him playing more safety than anything else. But he's been playing everywhere, including the perimeter at corner, which hasn't gone well. Josh says, keep 7 receivers. Josh, I'd be very, very surprised if they kept 7 receivers, if only because I think they're going to keep 3 tight ends. And if you keep 3 tight ends plus 7 receivers, that's 10 roster spots just on receivers and tight ends, and that's a tough way to build a roster. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility, but I'd be surprised. Could Gilbert take reps from Perry at this pace? I don't know about take reps, meaning like if he's going to like dilute Perry's planned snaps because he's playing so well. I think Perry will have a place in the defense that probably Gilbert doesn't do a lot of. Namely, I think when you see them jump into those four-man fronts, Perry will probably have his hand in the ground much more than Gilbert will. I think they're going to be used differently. So it's not like Madden where you have OLB and you just plug another guy in front of him. I think situationally they're going to be used a little bit different, but I do think, it's hard to deny what Gilbert's done so far through camp in the preseason, and they will undoubtedly look for ways to get him on the field more. Will Perry start against Chicago? Barry, that is the plan sitting here today. Now, who knows what happens over the course of the next 3 weeks when that opener happens, but right now that's what the Packers are planning on. I think Kevin King can step up this year. Robbie, absolutely. He was having a fantastic camp prior to hurting his shoulder. There's everything we've seen so far initially here in 2018 has pointed to King making that jump, that the proverbial year 1 to year 2 jump that they always talk about. Now we'll see what kind of effects he has coming off of this shoulder injury. He was out there in team today for the first time since suffering that shoulder injury, which tells you he should be in line to play on Friday night. But we'll see. We'll see what happens and how it affects him. We all saw how he really kind of struggled up and down with the other shoulder last year. He's told us in the locker room that this won't be the hindrance that was, but you never really take anything these guys say about their injuries at face value. You have to watch it on the field. See Raji having a bounce back year. Big one. Backup QB battle, Adam. I'm in agreement with Aaron over at Acme Packing Company, which I linked to at in the morning buzz the other morning. I think it was yesterday. I think Kaiser's taking the lead. Now we'll see what happens on Friday night in Oakland. Aaron Rodgers, a bit of news here, took scout team reps again today, as he did 2 weeks ago when they opened up against Tennessee, which would lead one to believe that he won't be playing on Friday night out in Oakland. But we'll see what they do with the quarterback spot. My hunch is Kaiser will get the start. I think he's taken over the lead there, the backup battle, but we'll see what Mike McCarthy and company think later this week. 2018 record prediction. Evan, check in 3 weeks. I always give my record prediction after the end of the preseason. I want Jake Kumaro to make the roster. What are his chances? Paul, they're really good. We'll see what the shoulder injury does for him as far as hindering his ability to make the roster. He was starting to mix in with special teams, which is always a good sign. You never really know until we get a full kind of reading on that shoulder. But I tell you what, the production's been there. He's been absolutely lights out in practice, and QB1 loves him. So those all add up for the kid to make the roster. Again, it's just about this shoulder injury. He did not participate in practice today, although he did tell us it was just a stinger. We'll see what happens down the line here. But right now, with what he's done, yeah, I think he's on the roster. Why so many running back signings? I got this question on Twitter last night. Because they need people to carry the ball in practice and in preseason games. They don't want to be banging guys for the next 2.5 weeks when they have an opener to prepare for and they're all banged up. We've got with Jamal Williams with an ankle injury. Devontae Mays is still out with a hamstring. Aaron Jones is finally back after missing weeks with a hamstring injury. Montgomery's been nicked up. So it's all about just getting reps for these on these offensive series, both in practice and in the preseason games. You don't want to be handing the ball to Aaron Jones in the second and third quarter of a meaningless preseason game. Give those to these new guys who they just picked up. Part of that has been injury driven. Part of it was, Akeem Dent, who they had picked up, just retired. Things of that nature. But it's all about getting through practice and preseason games, essentially. More talk about Mack yet? Well, we had one question at the beginning of the thing that I answered, and we hadn't had any until you just brought it up. So it's your fault now. Why did Rodgers Drive consist of so many 5-wide sets? But that's what they wanted to work on. Other than that I loved that first snap he took where I think they had an offset eye, and he went back and stared down his receiver, didn't throw it, and then, almost got killed. Classic. Like, we're all ready for Rodgers' return, and then he holds the ball and has to throw it away and almost gets destroyed. And of course, then he came back and throw it to Devontae Adams, and they're off to the races. But it was just funny to me. That's quintessential Rodgers. Who did they cut to make room? For what? For who? For how? They didn't cut anybody. Akeem went on retired list for one of the running backs, and they had the 90th spot still open for the last running back signing. Pro Football Weekly rated our running backs as poor to average. Who cares? I love those guys. They're really good at what they do, but when it comes to rating position groups, outside voices, outside eyes and ears really don't mean a whole heck of a lot. I'd probably put a lot more faith in what somebody like Tom Silverstein or Rob Demovsky says about the Packers running backs than guys who aren't watching practice every day, don't know the scheme, and don't know what the Packers are trying to do with those guys. Biggest unexpected cut for cap or other reasons? Well, Stuart, if it was unexpected, then I wouldn't expect it. But the one I would watch for is Kendricks, the tight end. There's a possibility, very, very remote, but there's a possibility they look at his salary and think, we don't need this on the roster and we can do without it. And they go with one of the young guys. I don't think that's going to happen. But that's the one possibility. I mean, before the injury, I would have thought Jake Ryan was another possibility, but obviously he's on IR now, and that's not a worry. How does Jake Ryan's injury affect us? Speaking of Jake Ryan, Jonathan, it's funny. It's gotten Oren Burks a lot more playing time and a lot more reps. Obviously, they've run guys like Martini and Ahmad Thomas a little bit more because of it, but I don't think it affects them a whole lot. Just because there aren't a ton of teams that run a lot of power, and that was his greatest forte. That's where he really shined. Is the teams that like to kind of run power, taking on blocks, getting off blocks, and making plays in the run game. In coverage, he was really up and down. He had improved actually, but I don't think it affects them too much. I think it gives it quickens Oren Burks' development and their desire to get him on the field and see what he can do, but I really don't think it bothers them too much this year. William, these are not lens crafters. Thank you very much. Lions cut D lineman. Will they look at him? Can't remember his name. Well, Tim, if you can't remember his name, I can't help you. Is Martini a starter? No, he's a fringe guy when it comes to playing from scrimmage, but he has been an absolute stalwart on special teams. He's been with the frontline special teams unit since the first day of camp. So that bodes well for his roster spot. That doesn't automatically mean he's going to make it, but it's a good chance that he'll make the 53 simply because he's been contributing on a lot of different special teams. How's Winston Moss? Great question. I don't know. Haven't been exposed to Winston too much this year. I was away for his one availability when I was in Green Bay, and the next week I just did the coordinators and didn't have to talk to Winston. So I'll let you know next time I run into Winston. He's been fine in the practice field. He says hi. He's always very personable. It's the podium sessions that have been an issue. Take the article limit off Packers News. Lots of exclamation points. Donovan, no! Pay for those articles on Packers News so I can feed my children. Why do you want stuff for free? You think I work for you? I work for free? Don't be a cheapskate. Pay for our content. Let's see. Do you think the cut down to 53 is going to be rough, R-U-F-F? Is that a dog joke, William? I tell you what, I think the wide receiver spot is going to be real interesting. And I think Jake Kumerow's ascendancy is going to make that a very, very difficult proposition. But for the most part, I don't see too many tough calls. But that wide receiver spot, and it's not just wide receiver, it's numbers everywhere else on the 53, trying to fit, do you keep 5, 6, 7 wide receivers? That's where Gutekunst is going to have to make the tough call. But for the most part, I don't think it'll be too hard. Your kids need to lose weight anyway. You saying they're fat, Joshua? Jackson is safety. Rich, he's balling out at corner. Why do you want to move him to safety? Do you miss the cut to 75? Not really. I know the coaches like it because, you know, they have fourth preseason game. They have a full allotment of players to play, and they don't have to play a lot of frontline guys like they used to. It's a little crazier that the only cut they have when you go from 90 to 53, confirming everything through agents, etc. That's become a bit more of a task. But yeah, the cut to 75. I'm kind of glad they did away with it. I know there are thoughts on either side. But we haven't even seen Jake with the twos. That's not true. You haven't seen Jake with the twos because you're not at practice. But Kumaro has run with the ones in practice, against the ones, and produced at a high level with Aaron Rodgers throwing him the football. Is Ha-Ha or weakness in the secondary? He doesn't play with intensity. Oh, that's a good question, Deborah. I go back and forth on this. Now, you're a professional, and you are meant to bring it each and every down, whether preseason or no. Now, we all know there are lots of veterans that don't do that. Clay Matthews doesn't give it all in the preseason. Mo Wilkerson the other night certainly didn't bring it. Ha-Ha Glenn-Dix on that missed tackle most certainly didn't. However, there are plenty of plays that I can show you where he's playing 100%, and he's where he's supposed to be, and he's making the tackle, and, you know, generally doing his job. I do think that things will tick up a little bit when the games count, and I do think there's an element of Ha-Ha kind of going through the motions, but all he can do is show us, you know, and when the time comes and the games count, all he can do is prove the naysayers wrong, and I think he's looking forward to trying to do that. All right, everybody, I'm going to have to go, but thanks so much for all the questions. I'm sorry if I couldn't get to yours. Make sure you're checking PackersNews.com, even with an article limit. Hey, here's an idea. Pay the $4, $3, $7, whatever it is, dollars a month to get all this awesome content instead of trying to steal it from us and, you know, make my kids starve. Why you gotta be like that? It's 2018. Anyway, in the meantime, make sure you're checking PackersNews.com. And unless there's any breaking news overnight, I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Thanks a lot, everyone.